What would it do for you and your family to make 6 figures in the next 12 months? How would that make you feel? But some remain vulnerable.
So what do they learn in the training?
There is a solution. Self-reliance is a core value of being an American. Once you learn how to make 6 figures listing luxury homes, your world changes. No boss, your own schedule. It's empowering.
12 sessions, 6 figures, 12 months. What would it do for you in your life? How would that make you feel?
Once you learn how to thrive on your own, life becomes a lot more fun.
Yeah!
Welcome back to the training, everybody. How to make 6 figures in 12 months selling real estate starting from scratch. This is week 7, Sales Skills 1. Let's review last week's action list from the Seller Whisperer. You should have made a lot of progress setting up your feedback system for your listings using a showing log. Hopefully you've been practicing some price reduction dialogues. You should have called all of your listings that have not sold and attempt to obtain a price reduction. We want you to maintain and increase your daily connections to meet your goals and keep up your calls, personal notes, drop-bys. They all pay off. This week is Sales Skills 1. We're going to discuss the all-important formula, digging deep, how to repeat, praise, and ask. We're going to discuss why selling features and only features does not work. We're going to discuss handling objections, closing skills, the concept of reconnaissance, how to take control of your conversations, the important segue, and the process of going cold to closed. So today we're going to reveal the formula. We've talked about the formula, and who doesn't like secrets? How could we make sense of this? What does this mean, right? Well, I'll tell you the end game. C stands for your closed escrow. So let's walk you through the formula, and this will be your roadmap to success. Before we break down and interpret the formula, you need to know that this formula will make you 6 figures within the next 12 months selling homes if you follow it as a roadmap through the minefield. This is your game plan to ensure that you win. This is your daily action list. This is exactly how you will win and change your financial destiny. So here is the formula. Time block. Call, go, and knowledge of results. That means tracking your results with your tally sheets, using the 1, 2, 3 dialogue to determine why, what, and how they feel. You structure your conversations with repeat, praising, acknowledging, and asking the next question. Today, we'll discuss how to use features and benefits and tie them down to lead to closing questions. Then you answer the objections and repeat that process and close the sale. That's the formula. When we learn what's important about moving, we start to discover why they're making the move, and what it will do for them comes next. Then we explore how will it make them feel. We will reveal their true motivation and their values. Another way to describe this would be digging deep. Digging deep is best done casually with an enthusiastic tone. And it involves having a meaningful conversation with your prospects and will increase rapport and bonding. The RPA in our formula is about repeat, praise, acknowledge, and ask. RPA, repeat, praise, ask. You've seen this before in all of the scripts and dialogues, and it is part of the blueprint of how you speak to your clients and prospects. The repeat, praise, acknowledge, ask question structure of dialogue helps you probe for information conversationally. It allows us then to move into the deeper level of closing, which is the FBT, features, benefits, and tie downs. This will structure dialogue for you to express to your client and answer the key question, why should they care? You see, typical salespeople continue to pitch features and self-promotion. If you've studied marketing at all, you are familiar with features and benefits or both. You need to understand the difference. A feature is something you offer as a differentiating factor. A benefit is answering the question of why that feature is important to the client or prospect. But don't stop there. You need to gain agreement, which we call a tie down. So let's dive down into the FBT, features, benefits, and tie downs. So in this example of a FBT statement to your client, the feature is what's unique. So when you're using the FBT closing technique as part of your success formula, we're used to pitching features, but you need to interpret those features, as we've discussed, how that feature will benefit your client or prospect. And we don't want to stop there. We want to tie that down and gain agreement. So in this statement above here, the tie down is you want to create competition with as many buyers as possible, correct? So that's the tie down component of the FBT. So let's move on. It's also very powerful to structure an FBT around the avoidance of pain as opposed to gaining pleasure. Sometimes avoiding pain could be even more powerful for your client. I recommend you structure your most powerful FBT in a way that you can place it in your chain of FBTs such that you can turn right upon its agreement when you gain agreement and start closing. What do you do when you ask a closing question? Many of you may know the answer to this tried and true sales coaching technique, but for those of you who don't, you need to understand this as gospel. Once you ask a closing question, you shut up. The first one to talk loses. Why is that? Well, when you ask a closing question, your prospect is considering buying your product or service. Sometimes there's an awkward silence. Let the silence hang. Why? Because he may be leaning towards saying a yes, and then you blurt out something else and it changes his or her mind. You can talk yourself right out of the sale. Handling objections has to be a sales skill that you really work on and study. It's going to take some time, but don't worry. You don't have to memorize a tremendous amount of dialogue. You do not have to memorize a tremendous amount of dialogue when it comes to handling objections. What you do is you memorize trigger words for each situation, and then you can use your own words. So here's an example of what I mean. The objection is, we'll save the commission by selling it ourselves. The trigger word is net. Let's analyze that a little bit. So what do you think that objection is? It looks like a FSBO objection, doesn't it? So let's say, for example, you're in a pre-list appointment. You're looking over at FSBO's house and he's told you he's not going to list, just bring him a buyer, etc. And you segue to the listing presentation and he rejects you. Says, no, we don't want to list. We'll save the commission by selling it ourselves. That's the objection. Trigger word is net. Your response to that objection would be, well, Mr. Seller, would you consider working with me if I could show you how I will actually net you more money at the close of escrow? Trigger word, net. Objection answered. And if that makes sense to you, Mr. Seller, why don't we sit down and I'll show you how I'm going to make you the most amount of money. I'm segueing to the listing presentation. So you'll see by this slide that the rest of these don't make sense because you don't know what those answers are. You don't know what those trigger words represent. We have that dialogue for you. But what's important for you to understand is this is the methodology of learning how to handle objections. You identify the most common objections and you come up with trigger words that you understand, and you use your own language. You can wing it a little bit in explaining how you're going to net them more, but all you remember is the word net. It's going to make handling a lot of objections much simpler and more effective for you and less of a challenge. The actual matrix for handling objections is a handout. It exists in the online resource center, and you can find it there under prospecting. We want to think it over. How many times have we heard that objection? The response to this objection is a great piece of dialogue that you need to master. But before we get to that, let's reduce the likelihood of you hearing it. We do that by uncovering objections prior to closing with the following question. If everything makes sense to you as we get all of your questions answered, is there any reason that you wouldn't be able to move forward today? This question is an invitation for your prospect to express concerns. In other words, get all those objections they may have out on the table so you can handle them. When you do hear, I need to think about it, here's how you handle it. You need to think about it. I understand this is a big decision, but just to clarify my thinking, what do you need to think about exactly? So again, we are trying to discover a specific objection so we can handle it. But the most challenging thing for you might be if they respond to you by saying, I need to think about the whole thing. You respond to that by then going through a laundry list of major issues you've been talking about and asking them if one of those is something they still need to think about, such as the price, commission, timing, etc. Once you uncover that objection, you handle it and close again. Your closing skills will separate you from the mediocre. I suggest that after you deliver your most powerful feature benefit tie down, you move the conversation directly to a close with authority, and you can do that eloquently by using what we call a transition close. A transition close is a list of a few actions that will take place, and you follow that up by asking the closing question. So here's an example of a transition close, which sets up our closing statement. We're giving the client a laundry list, essentially, of what's going to happen next. I'll place a sign in the yard, we'll schedule the photographer, I'll get to work on the color brochures, get to those to the printer, I'll schedule a broker's open. So we're going through a list of the near future of what's going to transpire, and it allows you to just elegantly roll right into a closing statement, such as, so to get you to why by January, so you can start to enjoy your retirement, bask in the sun, playing golf. All we need to do now is okay the listing agreement. And of course you have the RLA already filled out and you hand them the pen. That's the closing moment. And so the transition is supposed to just smooth or ease you into that closing moment, taking your client into the future, and all they need to do to start that future becoming real for them is just okay the agreement. Does that make sense? Just to clarify, what is not a closing statement is asking them what they think or asking them to let you know when they decide. Closers know how to close. Successful agents are closers. Successful agents are closers. Mediocre agents are order takers. Know the difference. The forced choice. The forced choice is a closing question that has been used for decades and is a fundamental closing technique. I strongly suggest you use it on a regular basis. And here's two examples so you can see a complete difference in a closer and an order taker. So what's better for you, Tuesday or Wednesday at 4 p.m.? That's a forced choice question, the answer to which both is an affirmation of what you want, as opposed to the way many real estate agents speak with prospects. If this sounds good to you, I can come over tomorrow. Of course, the prospect says, well, I'm busy tomorrow. Okay, sorry. Well, what about the next day? After work, I'll get back to you. So the order taker is not taking control of the conversation, as opposed to the professional salesperson that uses a forced choice question that basically provides the client or prospect two choices, both of which are a positive answer to the real estate agent. So here is an example of a scene that you can visualize, and I'm sure you've been in many of these, where you might be looking at a television in a big box electronics store. The salesperson walks up to you and says, "Can I help you?" Without even thinking, you just respond, "Thanks, I'm just looking." We've all done that hundreds of times, right? The professional person on a sales floor like that would not ask, "Can I help you?" He would or she would say something like this: "What's going to fit better in your living room wall, the 60 or 70 inch?" And you might respond without thinking about it, "Oh, no, it's for my bedroom." But the closer then smiles because he has just entered your private world. Please know that many powerful closing questions are not literal. What I mean by that is, for example, a closing question could be, is Tuesday or Wednesday best for the photographer to come over? Right after you've gone through your most powerful FBT. If they answer Tuesday or Wednesday, they're confirming you have the transaction. Does that make sense? So let's take a look at a few other sales skills, including reconnaissance, taking control, the segue, focusing on the prospect, cold to closed, and multiple yeses. Reconnaissance. I recommend that when you're doing your phone prospecting, you have a browser or multiple tabs on your browser open so you can do quick social media checks and searches on your prospects. The data in these social media websites will provide you with some great content to have natural and personal conversations with your prospects. Your mindset needs to change right now, and that is to taking control of your conversations. Your mindset should be you always want to take control immediately in your conversations, that first contact particularly. The way you do that is by making a simple request or a subtle command to your prospect, such as, "Hey, by the way, Brian, I've changed my phone number. Do you have a pen and paper handy? I'll give it to you. Please let me know when you're ready." You do it conversationally and casually, but what's happening here is you're becoming the alpha male or female in this relationship. For those of you that have been with me a while, you will know that I always coach, particularly in a preview situation, that you segue to the listing presentation. And what I mean by that is you will have many questions on a telephone call, such as, what is my home worth? What do you do to get homes sold, etc. You want to segue to the appointment. So you want to proceed to what follows without a pause in a segue. Let me give you an example here. The client says, "How much do you think my home is worth?" And again, this is on a telephone conversation. "How much is your home worth? I'll bring the most recent comparable sales with me and we can review it together. What's best for you, Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon?" So I'm segueing to a listing appointment and using a forced choice question. Very, very powerful position to be in. Another key segue is when you're previewing the home and they're not expecting to sit down for a listing presentation. Maybe you're just providing them some comps, creating more rapport, bonding with them, and the purpose of the meeting was just take a look at the house and give them a CMA. During that preview, you segue to the listing presentation, such as, "So Brian, do you have just a couple of minutes? I wanted to show you a couple things that I do that will ensure we get top dollar for this home." And if Brian says, "Yeah, of course, I have a couple minutes," you go through the entire listing presentation and let them stop you. That's what we call the segue to the listing presentation. You present it in such a way, casually, just want to show you a couple of things, should take just a couple of minutes, but then you continue with an hour-long listing presentation and let the prospect stop you. In some cases, you will get through an entire listing presentation and get a response like, "You know what, Scott? This is what I'm looking for. Let's just get it done." And bang, you sign an RLA. We are all inundated with advertising. We can't get away from it in our daily lives. So don't become white noise to your clients. You will notice in the FSBO and expired scripts and other coaching, I want you to focus on the prospect and deep dive with personal information that is relevant to the prospect. This will create rapport and open up the possibility of gaining a client. Let's talk about the cold to closed process. And the key word to this is process. Selling real estate is never a one-call close, and far from it. We all are anxious to get deals going, correct? I think you would agree. But you need to understand that this is a process that could have many, many steps to it. Let's take a look at one of the most difficult closes, which is taking a FSBO, somebody that doesn't want to list their home, all the way to closing that sale with the FSBO, getting a signed listing agreement. Let's look at this a little bit deeper. Calling a FSBO is often done incorrectly by a real estate agent. As we've talked about in the dominant listing agent training, when you call a FSBO, they don't even want to speak to you. They're hoping you're a buyer. So you must understand that this process is going to take time, and you're going to slowly move that FSBO from cold to warm to hot. Sometimes that may take 5 or 7 or 10 phone calls, 2 or 3 meetings in person. It is a process. You need to understand that. But at each point in the process, each contact, you're increasing rapport and trust. That's your goal. Know that it's going to take time, but is it worth it? Is it worth it to have 5 or 7 phone calls with a FSBO and 2 meetings to end up with a listing? You bet it is. As you will remember, one of the key components of the formula is the RPA. Repeat, praise or acknowledge, ask the next question. The answers to the correct questions will provide content for your multiple yes technique. The multiple yes technique is a very effective closing process where you capsulize things you've learned in your discussions with the client. Earlier you mentioned that moving was important so you and Jill can get to Seattle. Is that correct? And getting to Seattle will allow you to take that promotion you really want, correct? Earlier you said that you've already picked out a great neighborhood that you want to move to. Is that right? And I think you mentioned your new job will allow Jill to go back to school for her master's, where you were both thrilled about because it would feel like such an accomplishment. I think that's right, wasn't it? So you can see what I'm doing. I'm going through a number of things I already know the answers to, but it's basically aligning me with the client. We're on the same page. And it's providing fuel for me to then move to the close. So what you're doing with the multiple yes technique is outlining logic in a number of steps that concludes with signing the listing agreement. And here's how that dialogue may work. So to get you to Seattle and into school, all we need to do now is okay this agreement as you hand them the pen. So this formula should now start to make some sense. We go from time blocking to call and go, tracking our results, the why, what, and feelings, that's eliciting their values. We're going to structure our dialogues by repeating, praising, acknowledging, and asking more questions. We're going to use multiple feature benefit tie downs. We're going to close on the listing agreement, answer their objections, and close again. So here's your action list for your sales skills. One thing I definitely want you to do, and do not avoid doing this, is to create your own FBT list. The reason being is your FBT list is unique to you. It's going to take some time. Write it, rewrite it, continue to edit it. This is an ongoing process of creating ammunition for your listing presentations and closing skills. Next week is the art of negotiation. We're going to talk about becoming the center of the storm. We'll identify the real purpose of negotiating. We'll look at some negotiating styles, some attributes of effective negotiators, the definition of a successful negotiation, and most importantly, understanding the 4 key elements of a negotiation. After week 8, you are going to be a skilled negotiator. See you then. Good luck with your action list. Have a great week.